We're just right at the end of the meeting tonight, and it is. I found what was fascinating was that, of course, people have quite a deep emotion about some aspects of this. A lot of people are realising it's quite complex. It can be read many different ways. It can be read as being rich people don't want poor people in their area. It can be read as eco people don't want to ruin a beautiful beauty spot. And I know you yourself, you are very good in recognising. That what's got to be remembered here is that there are people needing a house to live in right now, and this emergency kind of idea would be seen by a lot of people as the right thing to do. And I myself have been still trying to make sense of exactly all the various different ways to look at this. Do you find after a meeting like this you've got a better grip on the situation, or do you still feel it's...
I think I have a good grip on the situation. Right. I've always felt that, having lived here now for near on 20 years and having watched developments come up, certainly Charlestown, Delgany Wood, the big ones, I know that some of the social housing needs, or anybody's housing needs, are directly as a result of poor planning happened in those days. It's also, as I said earlier in the meeting, the fact that Wicklow County Council have allowed the developers to slide from their obligations around the provision of social housing in each of those developments, which would, as Charlotte mentioned, have allowed a mix of people to grow up in an area and not have to a certain extent ghettoise people by virtue of their status or their financial situation. The housing crisis has been coming for a long time. It isn't anything new. And I think that what's happened is that as the recession has gone for some people, it's actually biting quite a number of people much harder than we expect. And people need homes. Delgany has a long and proud history of fighting very vigorously against things that will endanger the village. High density development, and it's particularly where poor access is concerned. I mean, the development of the Wicklow Arms has always been a concern. One of the biggest concerns is how on earth are they going to get in and out of there? The village is already very difficult. So I think that the emergency housing needs to be found. I think throwing it anywhere is not the right idea. Unfortunately, for the people in the village, I think it would be perceived as a bit of NIMBYism, as in not in my backyard. But I think the people, anybody here can put their hands on their hearts and say they've been in the back of many planning applications which have nothing to do with social housing. But are you right? To come back to the original point, people need emergency accommodation, and the land is available. There's land at Charlestown, there's land in Kilcool, where the council have the ability to build something a little bit more sufficient, and something that would then possibly integrate more ideally into a village, with shops and schools. This isn't about the people, it's about the problem that if they put housing there, it's an issue.
Well, I do think that the Wicklow County Council, obviously they do some good work, but there's no question in situations like this, they prove themselves to be like the fat kid who owns the ball, and whatever way he wants to play the game, we've got to play along.
I wonder how at all this time they haven't managed to learn to communicate effectively. All they had to do was manage this and manage the expectations. But most people are not annoyed about the inflammatory or emotional words of accommodation, emergency accommodation housing. It's the wholesale disregard for planning conditions, and that they can do what they want, and everybody else who can't move from their home due to their being stuck in negative equity has to go through major paperwork and lots of costs to try and just get a kitchen extension put onto their home. So a lot of it has come from people being very angry with their high-handedness. But all they had to do was to consult. And there's a Delgany Community Council there, so it's not as if it doesn't. We don't say we speak for everybody, but we are a forum by which we can get information out of people and get them into a room like this. And as somebody said, when I asked for planning for my home, which I just got a small extension, I was told I had to retain the trees. In a small residential road, 2 trees were marked on the plan. They were able to walk in 10 days ago and cut down every tree on that site without any regard to it. So it's, it's unfair.
But I think a large part of the kind of what you're looking for in these situations is just things that, like, there's a beautiful social housing development in Greystones on the Touche Place. It's just beautifully done, great little, anybody
and in Coven Court in Delgany. Has a lovely, sympathetic, nobody would know, and that's the point.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be able to look at somebody and know who they are by virtue of where they live.
Right.
We try not to have that.
And it's also the simple thing of like, you don't put a bed in the bathroom. You'll find what's the right place for this, and it's going to be really, the proper fit for them. It's not a case of in any way, shape or form, well, we don't want them in this room, we want them over there. It's really just a case of that will work, and that would be very sensible. Now you're dealing with a wall of death there on both Priory Road and Blackberry Lane to try and even get in and out of. And
very steep.
it might be natural selection. Maybe they're trying to get rid of old people. If they put them in there, by the end of the year, they'll have at least half of them will be gone.
They'll manage to take some of the young people as well, because the road's shit and dangerous. But you're quite right. I mean, just on a basic level, there's a lot of water that flows down there. The lighting is shocking. It's very steep. It's difficult for cars. Visibility is very poor, and adding potentially another 40 to 50 people in a very small space, concentrated around there, is just very poor planning.
Well, there is that feeling with Delgany. I grew up in Blackberry Lane itself, actually, and there is that feeling with Delgany that it is, the prettiest girl at the party, and every fat lad with money is trying to hit on her. There is that sort of developers are circling all day long.
Absolutely.
We've had this tragedy now of the Stylebond house, fire, and just the 74 houses up on Bellevue Hill. The development has been projected behind the Wicklow Arms. This is a hugely lucrative area to try and build some houses. So there's fire coming from every angle in regard to sort of planning. So it does seem, like a natural kind of reaction to think, well, this is the wrong fit for this particular area, and this particular village has been pretty much sort of well represented when it comes to housing. There's been a lot of developments. Do you think, deep in your heart, that this will go through? There is question marks over from councillors that I've spoken to that initial emergency house is a done deal, but they will have to go for planning permission and many other things with the rest of it.
I think the emergency accommodation is probably very likely. I mean, there are special provisions for that, and that's just the way it is. And I think we have to be respectful that we don't know people's situations, and a family in need is a family in need, and we should all be very charitable around that. And I don't think anybody's objecting to one home. The location possibly, and we'll discuss that about flood. Going ahead and using that as a lever to bypass planning, Wicklow County Council are going to find themselves in, coming up against people like me who are highly articulate and are going to make their life a misery.
I look forward to every second of it.
You're welcome.